3.40. 1.
Why do you have problems sleeping?
Well, I'm from a pretty rural area, but I moved to the city a few years ago when I got married. I've been living in the city for 3 years now. I have a lot of problems getting to sleep at night because our bedroom just isn't dark enough. I can't get used to sleeping in a bedroom where there's light coming in from the streetlights outside. Where I grew up, I always used to sleep in complete darkness because my bedroom window had blinds, and when I went to bed, I used to close the blinds completely. But here in the city, our bedroom window just has curtains, and curtains don't block out the light very well. It takes me a long time to get to sleep at night, and I always wake up more often than I used to.
So why don't you just get heavier curtains?
Because my wife doesn't like sleeping in a completely dark room. She says that she feels claustrophobic if the room is too dark.
Yes, a lot of people do feel like that.
3.41. 2.
Why do you have problems sleeping?
Well, I'm a police officer, and so I have to work different shifts, which means I work at night every other week. So I start work at 10 o'clock at night and end at 6 in the morning the following day. The main problem is that my body's used to sleeping at night, not during the day. So it's hard to get used to being awake all night and trying to work and concentrate when your body is just telling you to go to bed.
But isn't it something you get used to?
Actually, no, because I work during the day for 1 week, and then the next week I work at night, which means that just when my body has gotten used to being awake at night, then I go back to working in the day. And then, of course, I can't get to sleep at night because my body thinks it's going to have to work all night. The other problem is that when I get home after working a night shift, everyone else is just starting to wake up, so that means that it can be really noisy. The neighbors turn the radio on and bang doors and shout to wake their children up. So even though I'm really tired, it's just very hard to get to sleep.
How many hours do you usually sleep?
Before I became a police officer, I used to sleep about 8 or 9 hours a night. But I think now I probably don't sleep more than 6 hours.
3.42. 3.
Why do you have problems sleeping?
I have a lot of problems sleeping because of jet lag. I have to travel a lot in my job, and I take a lot of long-haul flights. I fly to New York quite often, and I arrive maybe at 6 o'clock in the evening, my time, but when it's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon in New York. So at 5 o'clock in the afternoon local time, I'll be feeling tired and ready for bed because it's my bedtime. But I can't go to sleep because I'm probably still working or having dinner with my American colleagues. Then, when I do finally get to bed at, say, midnight local time, I find that I wake up in the middle of the night because my body thinks that it's morning because I'm still working on UK time.
And can you get back to sleep when you wake up?
No, that's the problem. I can't get back to sleep. And then, the next day when I have meetings, I feel really sleepy. It's very hard to stay awake all day. And just when I'm finally used to being on New York time, then it's time to fly home. And flying west to east is even worse.
Oh, why's that?
Because when I get off the plane, it's early morning in the UK. But for me, on New York time, it's the middle of the night. It takes me 4 or 5 days to recover from one of these trips.
Gosh, that must be really difficult for you.
3.43. 1.
I used to sleep for 8 hours every night, but now I only sleep for 6.
I didn't recognize him. He didn't used to have a beard.
2.
When I lived in Mexico as a child, we used to have pan dulce for breakfast. We would buy them every morning from the local baker.
3.44. 1,
I'm not used to sleeping with a comforter. I've always slept with blankets.
Carlos has lived in Hong Kong for years. He's used to driving on the left.
2,
I can't get used to working at night. I feel tired all the time.
Don't worry, you'll get used to it fast.
3.45. 1,
I'm used to working on a team.
2,
I can't get used to driving on the left.
3,
I used to get up at 6 o'clock every day.
3.46. 1,
I'm not used to sleeping on such a hard bed.
2,
I'll never get used to living alone.
3,
Did you used to sleep a lot when you were a teenager?
3.47.
And finally today, the story of a sleepwalker who gets up in the middle of the night and goes to the kitchen and starts, you guessed it, cooking. Robert Wood, who's 55 years old, used to be a chef until he retired last year. We have Robert and his wife Eleanor with us in the studio today. Robert, tell us what happens.
Well, I've been a sleepwalker for about 40 years now. I think it first started when I was about 14 or so. Anyway, these days I get up about 4 or 5 times a week, and I always end up in the kitchen, and I start cooking something.
Do you always cook?
No, not always. I've done other things too. I remember once I put the TV on at full volume, and once I filled the bath with water, although I didn't get in it. But I usually cook.
Eleanor, do you wake up when this happens?
Yes, I usually wake up because he's making a noise. I go downstairs and usually I find him in the kitchen. Once he was just laying the table, but other times he's been cooking.
What kind of things does he cook?
All sorts of things. I've caught him cooking omelettes and spaghetti bolognese, and even caught him frying chips once. That was a bit scary because he could easily have burnt himself or started a fire.
Do you ever eat the things that Robert cooks?
No. It always looks lovely, but I must admit I've never tried it. Not at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the trouble is, he always leaves the kitchen in a terrible mess. The last time he sleepwalked, he spilt milk all over the place.
So, Robert, you don't know that you're cooking?
No, I haven't. I really am asleep, and afterwards I just have no recollection of having cooked anything.
You're getting some help to see if you can cure your sleepwalking, aren't you?
Yes, I've been going to a sleep clinic in Edinburgh, where they think they'll be able to help me.
Well, good luck with that. And thank you both for coming into the studio today. Now, we're going to take a break, but join us again in a few minutes.
.48.
We've been talking to Robert, the sleepwalking cook, and his wife Eleanor. And we're now joined by Professor Maurice from Rochester, New York, who is an expert in sleepwalking.
Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome, Professor Maurice. Does this story surprise you?
No, it doesn't. Not at all. I've treated people who have driven cars, ridden horses, and I had one man who even tried to fly a helicopter while he was asleep.
Oh, no.
Do people usually have their eyes open when they sleepwalk?
Yes, sleepwalkers do usually have their eyes open. That's why sometimes it's difficult to know if someone is sleepwalking or not.
How common is sleepwalking?
More common than you might think. Research shows that about 18% of the population has a tendency to sleepwalk. But it's much more common in children than in teenagers or adults. And, curiously, it's more common among boys than girls. Adults who sleepwalk are usually people who used to sleepwalk when they were children. They might do it after a stressful event. For example, after a traffic accident.
People always say that you should never wake a sleepwalker up when they're walking. Is that true?
No, it isn't. People used to think that it was dangerous to wake up a sleepwalker, but, in fact, this isn't the case. You can wake a sleepwalker up without any problem, although, if you do, it is pretty common for the sleepwalker to be confused, so they probably won't know where they are for a few minutes.
So, if we see someone sleepwalking, should we wake them up?
Yes, you should remember that another of the myths about sleepwalkers is that they can't injure themselves while they are sleepwalking. But this isn't true. If a sleepwalker is walking around the house, they might trip or fall over a chair or even fall downstairs. There was a case a while ago of a 9-year-old girl who opened her bedroom window while she was sleepwalking and fell 30 feet to the ground. Luckily, she wasn't seriously injured. So, you see, Eleanor, you're right to worry that Robert might burn himself when he's cooking. You need to wake him up and get him back to bed.
How long does sleepwalking usually last?
It can be very brief. For example, a few minutes. The most typical cases are people getting up and getting dressed or people going to the bathroom. But it can occasionally last much longer, maybe half an hour or even more, as in Robert's case.
And what happens when sleepwalkers wake up? Do they remember the things they did while they were sleepwalking?
No, as Robert says, a sleepwalker usually doesn't remember anything afterward.
So, is a sleepwalker responsible for his or her actions?
That's a very good question, actually. A few years ago, a man from Canada got up in the middle of the night and drove 20 miles from his home to the house where his parents-in-law lived, and, for no apparent reason, he killed his mother-in-law.
Oh, goodness.
The man was charged with murder, but he was found not guilty because he had been asleep at the time he committed the crime.
What a sad story. Professor Maurice, thank you very much for joining us today.
$3.49. 1.
Most people start feeling sleepy around 11 at night.
2.
They often open their mouth and yawn.
3.
They go to bed and set their alarm clock.
4.
They get into bed and put their head on the pillow.
5.
They cover themselves up with a comforter or with sheets and blankets.
6.
Soon they fall asleep.
7.
Some people make a loud noise when they breathe. In other words, they snore.
8.
During the night, some people have bad dreams, called nightmares.
9.
If you don't hear your alarm clock, you might oversleep.
10.
If you drink coffee in the evening, it may keep you awake.
11.
Some people can't sleep because they suffer from insomnia.
12.
These people often have to take sleeping pills.
13.
Some people take a siesta or nap after lunch.
14.
A person who sleeps well sleeps like a log.
15.
Someone who is tired after flying to another time zone is jet-lagged.
16.
Someone who is sleeping very deeply is fast asleep.
3.50. A short movie on sleep research.
Did you get enough sleep last night? I didn't, nor the night before. These days, lots of people have trouble getting a good night's sleep. Insomnia, the inability to get to sleep, is now a major issue for many people. In Britain, over half of the adult population often struggle to fall asleep. And 10% of people regularly take sleeping pills. Even when people do get to sleep, they often sleep badly. Some people even struggle with sleeping disorders. These range from the common to the bizarre. Common sleep disorders include sleepwalking and somniloquy, also known as sleep talking. Stranger disorders include sleep paralysis, where people wake up unable to move, and exploding head syndrome, where people hear a loud noise like a bomb just before they sleep. In order to combat these sleep disorders, we need to understand more about sleep's effects. The problem is, sleep is still a mystery. I've come to the sleep unit at the Surrey Clinical Research Centre to meet the scientists who are trying to find out more. These scientists all study sleep. Instead of laboratories, they have bedrooms full of high-technology equipment. These machines measure a person's brain activity and body movement during sleep. Scientists use these measurements to analyse people's sleeping patterns. They hope to discover what sleep is for and what happens to us when we don't sleep enough. We already know that sleep deprivation affects the part of the brain that controls our behaviour, our personality and our emotions. So when we don't get enough sleep, all of these things are affected. But why are we so sleep deprived? Researchers here say that we are sleeping enough hours, but that our sleep patterns are more irregular. The average adult sleeps for about 7¼ hours per night. This is almost exactly the same amount of sleep our ancestors used to get over 100 years ago. The difference is, they slept for just over 7 hours every night, but we don't. Our sleeping patterns have changed to fit modern life. Today, most people lead busy lives, and we often sleep less during the week. Sometimes we only sleep for 5 or 6 hours because we stay up late to work or spend time with friends. Then, at the weekend, people spend longer in bed and can sleep for 10 hours. Perhaps this irregularity in sleeping patterns is something our brains find difficult to get used to, and this in turn affects our health and general well-being. That's why sleep clinics like this one are trying to learn more, so we can all sleep a little easier.